The sky was burning. Lysizana stood at the window of her observatory and watched the fire rain down from the heavens. Each streak of light was a bomb. Each explosion was a city dying. Her homeworld of Shalora, the paradise of crystal forests and glowing seas, was being murdered before her eyes. She pressed her 4 delicate hands against the glass. Her translucent skin showed the rapid beating of her twin hearts. Around her, the other astronomers huddled in corners, weeping softly. They were Velith. They were gentle. They had never known war. Now war had found them. The Kethvari came without warning. Their ships appeared in orbit like a swarm of dark insects, blocking out the light of the twin suns. They did not ask for surrender. They did not make demands. They simply began to destroy. Lysizana had studied the stars her entire life. She knew about the Kethvari from old records. They were slavers, conquerors. They moved from world to world, taking what they wanted and crushing everything else. 100 species had fallen to them over 10,000 years. Now it was the Velith's turn. "Elder Lysizana," whispered young Tethrin, crawling toward her on trembling limbs. "What do we do? Please, tell us what to do." She had no answer. The Velith had no weapons. They had no soldiers. They had spent their civilization building beauty and knowledge and peace. They had believed the universe was kind. The universe was not kind. Through her telescope, she could see the Kethvari dropships descending on the capital city. She could see the running figures, so small, so helpless. She could see the flash of energy weapons cutting them down. Her people were being harvested like grain. The Galactic Concord had already refused to help. Lysizana had listened to their response just hours ago. "We cannot intervene in Kethvari territorial actions. We advise the Velith to negotiate terms of surrender." Cold words from cold beings who cared nothing for her people's survival. There was no one left to call. Or was there? Lysizana turned from the window and moved to the deepest part of her observatory. There, covered in dust and forgotten by time, sat an ancient machine. Her grandmother's grandmother had built it, a first contact beacon, designed to send messages into the unknown reaches of space. The Velith had never used it. They had never needed to. Her assistants watched as she began to power it up. The old systems hummed and crackled. "Elder." "What are you doing?" asked Tethrin. "Calling for help," she replied. "From whom?" "The Concord has abandoned us." Lysizana's fingers danced across the controls. "Then I will call beyond the Concord. I will call to anyone who might listen. To any being in this universe who still has mercy in their heart." The beacon came alive. It was primitive compared to modern technology, but it was powerful. It broadcast on every frequency, in every mathematical language the Velith knew. The message was simple. The message was desperate. "Help us. We are dying. Please, someone, help us." The signal went out into the void. It passed the moons of Shalora. It passed the outer planets. It left the solar system and traveled into deep space, spreading like ripples in a pond. Most of the galaxy would ignore it. The Concord species were afraid of the Kethvari. They would not risk war for a small, weak species like the Velith, but the signal did not stop at Concord borders. It traveled further, past the charted systems, past the mapped territories, past a ring of warning beacons that broadcast in 100 languages. Danger. Quarantine zone. Do not approach. Extreme hazard. Beyond those warnings lay a single yellow star and a small blue planet. The galaxy called it many names. The Death World. The Forbidden Zone. The place where evolution had gone mad and produced something terrible. The inhabitants called it Earth. The signal reached a monitoring station on a frozen island in the planet's northern regions. A woman named Yuki Tanaka was working the night shift, drinking hot coffee and watching her screens with tired eyes. She almost missed it. The signal was weak, distorted by distance and interference. But her artificial intelligence did not miss it. "Commander," the AI said, "I am detecting an unusual transmission. Origin point approximately 4,200 light-years distant. The pattern appears to be structured. Yuki set down her coffee. Structured how? Mathematical sequences. Repeating prime numbers. Fibonacci patterns. Commander, I believe this is a distress signal. Someone is calling for help. Yuki's heart began to beat faster. She had spent 15 years listening to the stars. She had heard many things, but she had never heard anything like this. She ran the signal through every translation program they had. Slowly, the meaning became clear. A star map, coordinates, and words, rendered in basic universal symbols. Help us. We are dying. Please. Yuki reached for her communication device with shaking hands. This was not her decision to make. This would go to the highest levels of the Terran Coalition. But she knew, deep in her bones, what her people would decide. Humans did not ignore cries for help. Back on Shalora, Lysizana had no hope left. The beacon had sent its message, but she expected nothing. The universe had shown its true face. It was cold and empty and cruel. The Kethvari soldiers broke through the observatory doors just as the twin suns began to set. They were massive creatures, covered in hard shells and sharp edges. They looked at the cowering Velith the way a predator looks at prey. The commander clicked his mandibles in amusement. Astronomers, weak little star watchers, you will make poor slaves, but you will make slaves nonetheless. Lysizana stood before her people, trying to shield them with her fragile body. Please, she begged. We have done nothing to you. We have no quarrel with the Dominion. The commander laughed. It was a terrible sound. You have something we want. Your world. Your labor. Your lives. That is enough. As rough claws grabbed her and dragged her away from the only home she had ever known, Lysizana whispered a prayer to whatever gods might exist. She prayed for a miracle. She prayed for salvation. She prayed for someone, anyone, to hear her cry. She did not know that someone had heard. 4,200 light-years away, on a world of crushing gravity and burning oxygen and endless danger, her message was being played for the leaders of the human race, and those leaders were becoming very, very angry. The Velith had called into the darkness, hoping for angels. Something else had answered. Something the galaxy feared more than the Kethvari. Something that did not forgive those who harmed the innocent. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were bringing war. The council chamber in Geneva was silent. 12 men and women sat around the great table, their faces lit by holographic displays showing the translated message. Chancellor Marcus Okonkwo had played it 3 times now. Each time, the silence grew heavier. Help us. We are dying. Please. Someone help us. The coordinates pointed to a world called Shalora, home to a species called the Velith. Intelligence reports showed the Kethvari Dominion had invaded 7 days ago. By now, millions were probably dead. Millions more were being taken as slaves. The signal is genuine, said Intelligence Director Sarah Chen. We have confirmed Kethvari fleet movements in that sector. This is real. And the Galactic Concord? Asked Chancellor Okonkwo. They have officially declared non-intervention. They consider the Velith situation an internal Kethvari matter. Defense Minister Alexander Petrov slammed his fist on the table. Internal matter? They are butchering civilians. They are taking slaves. The Concord does not recognize slavery as a violation worthy of intervention, Chen replied. Her voice was cold, but her eyes burned with anger. They also remind us that humans are not permitted to leave the quarantine zone under any circumstances. They consider our very existence a threat to galactic stability. Today, the room fell silent again. Everyone knew the history. Humanity had reached the stars 200 years ago, full of hope and wonder. They had expected to find friends among the alien civilizations. Instead, they found fear. The galaxy looked at humans and saw monsters. Creatures from a world of impossible conditions. Earth had gravity that would crush most species. It had an atmosphere of corrosive oxygen. It had temperature swings that ranged from burning heat to freezing cold. It had predators and diseases and natural disasters beyond counting. And humans had not just survived there. They had thrived. They had become the apex predators of a world that killed everything else. Their bodies were dense with muscle. Their bones were nearly unbreakable. They could heal from wounds that would kill any other species. They could run for hours without stopping. They could eat poisons and drink acid and breathe fire. The Galactic Concord had taken one look at humanity and decided they were too dangerous to exist. The quarantine zone was established. Humanity was forbidden from expanding beyond their own solar system. They were locked in a cage of their own making. For 200 years, humanity had obeyed. They had built their civilization within the allowed boundaries. They had watched the galaxy from afar, knowing they would never be welcome. Now someone was calling for help, and the cage suddenly felt very small. Admiral Helena Voss was the last to speak. She was 63 years old, with silver hair and scars on her face from battles fought in the outer colonies. She had spent her entire life preparing for wars that never came. Now, perhaps, one had finally arrived. "The Concord says we cannot intervene," she said slowly. "They say galactic law forbids it." Chancellor Okonkwo nodded. "That is correct. Galactic law also says we are too dangerous to exist. That we should be quarantined like a disease. That our children should never see the stars." Voss stood up, her eyes moving around the table. "I stopped caring what galactic law says a long time ago. If we do this," warned Foreign Minister Yuki Yamamoto, "there is no going back. The Concord will see it as an act of aggression. We could be starting a war with the entire galaxy." "The entire galaxy stood by while innocent people were murdered," Voss replied. "If they want to make enemies of those who protect the helpless, then I welcome their hatred." Chancellor Okonkwo looked at the faces around him. He saw determination. He saw anger. He saw the same fire that had burned in human hearts since the first tribes gathered around campfires to protect each other from the darkness. "We vote," he said. "All in favor of military intervention in Velith space?" 12 hands rose. The vote was unanimous. The orders went out within the hour. Across Earth and its colonies, sirens began to wail. Military bases that had been quiet for decades suddenly came alive. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for theoretical conflicts received real deployment orders for the first time. The first expeditionary fleet assembled in orbit around Mars. 12 dreadnoughts, each one 3 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. 40 cruisers. 200 support vessels. 500,000 Terran Marines, the most dangerous soldiers the galaxy had ever produced. At the heart of the fleet sat the flagship, the TCS Nemesis. Admiral Voss stood on its bridge, watching the final preparations through the main viewport. Around her, officers worked with calm efficiency. They had waited 2 centuries for this moment. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "all ships report ready for slipspace transition." Voss nodded. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "Warriors of Earth," she said, her voice carried across 1,000 ships. "For 200 years we have been caged, feared, hated for what we are. The galaxy looked at humanity and saw only monsters." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Today we show them what kind of monsters we are. Someone out there is dying. Someone called for help, not knowing who would answer. They reached out into the darkness, hoping for salvation." Her voice hardened. "We are that salvation. We are the answer to their prayer. We are coming for them, and we are coming with everything we have." The Kethvari think they know violence. They think they understand war. They have never faced Deathworlders. Around the fleet, engines began to charge. Reality itself seemed to bend as slipspace drives powered up. "Show them what humanity does when the innocent are threatened. Show them why the galaxy fears us, and when we are done, make sure that no one in this universe ever again thinks they can harm the helpless without consequence." The Nemesis shuddered as its drive activated. Through the viewport, stars began to stretch and blur. "All ships," Admiral Voss commanded, "engage slipspace. Take us to war." The fleet vanished in a flash of light, leaving only empty space behind. Across the galaxy, ancient sensor networks detected the transition. Warning signals flashed on 100 worlds. The Galactic Concord received emergency reports from their monitoring stations. The humans were moving. The quarantine had been broken. On the Kethvari throne world, Supreme Hierarch Vex Amon received word of the approaching fleet. He clicked his mandibles in confusion. Humans? The Deathworlders? Coming for a worthless species like the Velith? He dismissed the reports as errors. No one would risk war for such a small prize. He would learn his mistake soon enough. In the cold void between stars, the Terran fleet raced toward Shalora. 500,000 soldiers checked their weapons and said their prayers. They were about to meet the galaxy for the first time, and the galaxy was not ready for what was coming. Lysizana had stopped counting the days. She huddled in the ruins of her observatory with 37 survivors. They had escaped the slave camps through broken walls and forgotten tunnels. Now they hid like animals in the rubble of their own civilization, eating scraps and drinking rainwater. Above them, Kethvari patrol ships crossed the sky in endless patterns. The crystal forests that had once been so beautiful were now burning. The bioluminescent seas had turned dark with ash and death. Hope had died long ago. The SOS beacon had sent its message into the void, and the void had not answered. No one was coming. No one cared. Lysizana pressed her back against a shattered wall and closed her eyes. Perhaps tomorrow the Kethvari would find them. Perhaps tomorrow it would finally be over. Then the sky changed. It began with light. Brilliant. Blinding light that split the darkness like a knife. Lysizana looked up and saw something impossible. Ships were appearing in orbit. Not at the edge of the system where normal vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel, but directly above Shalora itself. This was madness. The gravitational forces alone should have torn any ship apart. No sane species would attempt such a thing, but the ships did not break apart. They held together, dozens of them, then hundreds, pouring out of twisted space like an angry swarm. Tethrin grabbed her arm. What is happening? Who are they? Lysizana could only stare. The ships were unlike anything in Concord records. They were brutal, angular things, built for war rather than grace. Their hulls were thick and scarred. Their weapons glowed with barely contained power. Kethvari communication channels exploded with panicked chatter. Lysizana's salvaged radio picked up fragments of the confusion. Unknown vessels in orbit. Count is impossible. Over 200 capital ships. They came through slip space inside the gravity well. How is that possible? War Master Skethrix demands identification. All ships respond. Then a new voice came through the channels. It was alien. Harsh. Speaking through a translation device that gave it a strange mechanical edge. But the words were clear. This is Admiral Helena Voss of the Terran Coalition Navy. You are occupying the sovereign territory of an innocent species. You have committed acts of genocide and enslavement. You have 20 minutes to withdraw from this system. Silence on all channels. Then War Master Skethrix responded, his voice dripping with contempt. Terran Coalition? Humans? The Death World vermin dare to challenge the Dominion? His laughter was ugly and cruel. We outnumber you 3-1, animal. Our ships have crushed 100 species. You will be the 101st. The human admiral's response was calm, cold, terrible. 19 minutes now. After that, we stop asking. War Master Skethrix ordered his fleet to attack. 1,200 Kethvari warships surged toward the human vessels, weapons charging, crews screaming battle cries. 20 minutes passed. The TCS Nemesis fired first. A single beam of concentrated energy that struck the lead Kethvari dreadnought and cut it in half. The ship exploded in a ball of fire that briefly outshone the twin suns. Then the rest of the human fleet opened fire. Lysizana watched from the surface as the sky became a storm of light and death. She expected to see the smaller human force destroyed. She expected to see the Kethvari triumph as they always had. That was not what happened. Human ships absorbed hits that should have destroyed them. Their thick hulls, designed for a world of crushing gravity and terrible conditions, shrugged off weapons that would have vaporized Concord vessels. Their return fire was devastating, punching through Kethvari shields as if they did not exist. And then the boarding parties came. Kethveri's sensors screamed warnings as small craft launched from the human vessels. But these were not ordinary shuttles. They were pods, fired like bullets, crossing the gap between ships in seconds. They slammed into Kethveri hulls and burned through the metal. What emerged from those pods was nightmare. Terran Marines fought in conditions that would kill any other species. The vacuum of space was nothing to creatures who had evolved on a world where the atmosphere itself was poison. They moved with impossible speed and strength. Gravity that would pin a Kethvari to the floor, meaning nothing to bodies built for far worse. On the bridge of the Kethvari flagship, Warmaster Skethrix watched his fleet die. Ship after ship went dark. His proud warriors, who had never known defeat, were being slaughtered by creatures they had dismissed as animals. The doors to his bridge exploded inward. Terran soldiers poured through. Their armor splashed with blue Kethvari blood. They moved like predators, efficient and deadly. In seconds, his guards were dead. A human approached him. It was female, though Skethrix could barely tell the difference. She had removed her helmet, revealing a face that was terrifying in its alien simplicity. 2 eyes, 1 mouth. Soft skin over hard muscle. "You are the commander?" she asked. Skethrix spat at her. "I am War Master of the Dominion. You will pay for this insult with your entire species." The human did not react to his threats. She simply looked at him with cold, dark eyes. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your ground forces are surrounded. You can surrender now and live, or you can fight and die. I don't particularly care which." 6 hours. That was all it took. 6 hours to destroy a fleet that had conquered 100 worlds. The Kethvari survivors surrendered in waves, too shocked and broken to continue fighting. On the surface of Shalora, human dropships began to land. Lysizana gathered her courage and led her people out of hiding. She expected to face new conquerors, new masters. She prepared herself for more cruelty. Instead, she saw something that broke her hearts. A human medic, a young female with dark skin and kind eyes, was kneeling before a wounded Veleth child. The child was missing an arm, taken by Kethvari weapons. The human was wrapping the wound with gentle hands, speaking in soft tones. "It's okay," the medic said. "You're safe now. I know you're scared. I know it hurts. But we're here. And we're not going to let anyone hurt you again. I promise." The child looked up at the terrifying Deathworlder with wide eyes. Then, slowly, she reached out with her remaining arm and touched the human's face. The medic smiled. It was the warmest thing Lysizana had ever seen. Around them, more humans were emerging from their ships. They carried medical supplies, food, water, blankets. They moved among the Veleth survivors with care and concern, treating wounds and offering comfort. One of them approached Lysizana. He was tall and broad, his face marked with scars from old battles. But his voice was gentle. "Are you the leader here?" he asked. Lysizana could barely speak. I sent the signal. The SOS. I did not think anyone would come." The human nodded. "We came as fast as we could. I'm sorry it took so long." Sorry. He was sorry. These impossible warriors, these Deathworlders who had just destroyed an invincible enemy in hours, were apologizing for not arriving sooner. Lysizana felt tears streaming down her translucent cheeks. "Who are you?" she whispered. "What are you?" The human looked around at his fellow soldiers, at the Veleth they were helping, at the burning sky that was finally beginning to clear. "We're human," he said simply, "and we take care of each other." The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, species that had never heard of Earth suddenly learned the name. The Veleth had been saved. The Kethvari fleet had been annihilated. The Deathworlders had left their quarantine zone. The Galactic Concord was horrified. Ambassador Threlvax of the Concord Council stood before the emergency assembly, his tendrils trembling with fear. "This is precisely what we warned against. The humans have proven themselves to be exactly the threat we always knew they were. They have violated sacred law. They have shown their true violent nature. But not everyone agreed. Ambassador Kel Mori of the Thessian Collective spoke quietly. They saved millions of lives. The Kethvari were committing genocide. And we did nothing. The humans did something. Through violence, through war. Yes, Kel Mori replied. And the Velith are alive because of it. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why the monsters showed more mercy than we did. The debate raged on. But while the Concord argued, the humans were moving. Admiral Voss had received new orders from Earth. Liberation of Shalora was not enough. The Kethvari Dominion had committed crimes against countless species for 10,000 years. They had enslaved billions. They had destroyed civilizations. They could not be allowed to continue. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet did not stop at Shalora. They pressed deeper into Kethvari space, following the trail of suffering back to its source. World after world fell to the human advance. Kethvari defenses that had held for centuries crumbled in days. Slave populations that had known nothing but chains suddenly found themselves free. On the planet Thessar, human soldiers opened the doors of labor camps and found thousands of emaciated beings from dozens of species. Many had been born in captivity. They had never known freedom. A young Marine named James Washington walked through the camps, handing out food and water. An elderly alien, so thin that his bones showed through his skin, grabbed James's hand and wept. "Are the Kethvari gone?" the old one asked. "Are they truly gone?" James knelt down to meet his eyes. "Yes. They're gone, and they're never coming back." "Who are you? What species could defeat the masters?" "We're humans. We're from a world called Earth." The old alien shook his head in wonder. "Earth. I will remember that name. My children's children will remember it." Similar scenes played out across Kethvari space. Humans became legends, whispered about in liberated camps and freed colonies. The Deathworlders. The saviors, the warriors who came from beyond the stars to break the chains. But the Kethvari were not finished. On the throne world, Supreme Hierarch Vexamon watched his empire crumble. He had ruled for 600 years. He had commanded the most powerful military force in the quadrant. And now, in mere months, humans had torn it all apart. He could not understand. How could such primitive creatures defeat his glorious dominion? How could beings from a single cursed world bring down an empire that had stood for millennia? His advisors begged him to surrender. They showed him the reports. The humans were unstoppable. They fought without rest. They survived wounds that should have killed them. Their ships absorbed damage that would destroy any other vessel. "They are not natural," one advisor whispered. "They are demons, monsters from a hell world. We cannot defeat them." Vexamon killed that advisor with his own claws. He would not accept defeat. Not from animals, not from Deathworlders. "If we cannot defeat them in battle," he said, "then we will make them pay for their victory. Prepare the World Breaker." The World Breaker was the Dominion's ultimate weapon. A massive platform designed to crack planets open, to reduce entire worlds to rubble. It had been used only twice in Kethvari history, both times to make examples of species that dared to resist. Vexamon targeted Shalora. If the Kethvari could not have the Velith homeworld, no one would. The Human Intelligence Network detected the weapon's activation. Admiral Voss received the report in the middle of a strategy meeting. Her face went pale, then hard as stone. "How long until it's in range of Shalora?" 18 hours, Admiral. "And how long until we can intercept with the fleet?" 22 hours. "We won't make it." Voss stood in silence for a long moment. Around her, officers waited for orders. Finally, she spoke. "Get me Major Chen Weilin. I have a mission for her." Major Chen was a legend among Terran Marines. She had once survived 36 hours in hard vacuum with a punctured suit. She had led assault teams into situations that should have been certain death and walked out alive. If anyone could stop the World Breaker, it was her. Her team consisted of 50 volunteers. They launched in fast attack shuttles, racing ahead of the main fleet at speeds that pushed their vessels to the breaking point. They reached the World Breaker with hours to spare. The massive weapon hung in space like a metal moon, surrounded by a fleet of Kethvari defenders. A straight assault was impossible, so Major Chen did not attack straight. Her shuttles came in from the weapon's blind side, using the planet's moon to mask their approach. They landed on the surface of the world breaker itself, cutting through the hull with plasma torches. Inside, the fighting was brutal. Kethvari soldiers swarmed through narrow corridors, trying to stop the invaders. Human marines met them head-on, fighting with rifles and blades, and bare hands when necessary. Chen lost soldiers with every step. Good men and women who had volunteered to save a world they had never seen. They died in the dark corridors of an alien weapon, thousands of light years from home. But they kept pushing forward. Finally, Chen reached the control center. The blast doors were sealed, but a shaped charge took care of that. She led her remaining 23 soldiers into the heart of the weapon. Supreme Hierarch Vexamon was waiting for her. He stood before the main control console, his claw hovering over the activation switch. Around him, his personal guards formed a protective ring. "Human," he hissed. "You are too late. Watch as I destroy everything you came to save." Chen raised her rifle. "Step away from the console." "Or what? You will shoot me?" "Go ahead. I will trigger the weapon as I die. Shalora will burn. Billions of your precious Velith will perish. And the Dominion will have the last laugh." The room was silent. Chen's soldiers spread out, finding cover, taking aim at the guards. But no one fired. If Vexamon triggered the weapon, everything was lost. Chen lowered her rifle. She stepped forward, hands raised. "You want to die so badly?" she asked. "Fine. But I have a question first." Vexamon clicked his mandibles in amusement. "A final question from a dying animal? Very well. Speak. Why did you do it? The slavery. The genocide. The destruction. Was it worth it?" The Supreme Hierarch laughed. "Worth it? We built an empire. We ruled 100 worlds. We were gods. You were bullies." Chen replied. "You picked on the weak because you were too afraid to face the strong. And the moment someone stronger came along, your empire fell apart." Vexamon's humor vanished. His claw tightened on the console. "You know nothing, human. You are insects. Your victory is an accident. Your species will be forgotten." Chen smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Maybe, but your species will be remembered forever as the slavers who got their teeth kicked in by the Deathworlders. History will remember the Kethvari Dominion as a lesson in what happens when you hurt innocent people." She moved faster than Vexamon could react. Thousands of years of evolution, on a world that killed everything too slow, had made humans into something terrifying. Her knife was in his throat before his claw could move an inch. "You picked the wrong galaxy to be monsters in," she whispered as he died. The guards tried to fight. They lasted less than a minute. Major Chen stepped over the bodies and began shutting down the world breaker. Behind her, her soldiers secured the control room. The weapon's massive engines went dark. Shalora was safe. She opened a communication channel to the Nemesis, Admiral Voss. "The weapon is disabled. The Supreme Hierarch is dead." There was a long pause. Then, Voss's voice came through, heavy with relief and pride. "Well done, Major. Well done indeed. Come home. The war is over." "Well done. Well done, Major." Chen looked around at her surviving soldiers. 23 out of 50. It was a heavy price, but Shalora would live. The Velith would survive. It was worth it. It was always worth it. In the months that followed, the Kethvari Dominion surrendered completely. Their remaining leaders were captured and tried for their crimes. Their slave populations were freed. Their war machines were dismantled. A 10,000-year empire of cruelty had fallen in less than 1 year. And across the galaxy, people whispered a new truth. Do not harm the innocent. The humans are watching, and they do not forgive. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Kethvari Dominion. Shalora was healing. The crystal forests were growing back, their spires catching the light of the twin suns and scattering rainbows across the land. The bioluminescent seas had been cleaned of ash and death. Cities that had been rubble were rising again, rebuilt with help from human engineers who worked alongside Velith builders. But today was not about construction. Today was about something larger. The Galactic Assembly had been formed. For the first time in history, every species in the known galaxy had sent representatives to a single gathering. They met on Shalora, in a great hall built specifically for this occasion, and at the center of the assembly, humans sat as equals among the stars. The quarantine was over. The cage had been opened. Lysizana had been chosen to speak. She stood at the podium, looking out over thousands of delegates from hundreds of species. A year ago, she had been hiding in the ruins of her observatory, praying for salvation. Now she was addressing the entire galaxy. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. 1 year ago, she began. My world was dying. The Kethvari had come to enslave us, and no one would help. The Galactic Concord told us that intervention was not permitted. Our neighbors told us that they were sorry, but it was too dangerous. We were alone. She paused, letting her words sink in. In my desperation, I sent a signal into the darkness. I called for help, not knowing who would hear. I expected nothing. The universe had already shown me its cruelty. Why would anyone answer the cry of a small, weak species that most of the galaxy did not even know existed? Her gaze found the human delegation. Admiral Voss sat there in her dress uniform, her silver hair pulled back, her scarred face calm. Beside her were soldiers and diplomats, engineers and doctors, men and women who had crossed the galaxy to save strangers. But someone did answer, Lysizana continued. The humans came, the Deathworlders. The species that this Concord had locked away behind warning beacons and quarantine zones. The beings that the galaxy called too dangerous to contact. She saw some delegates shift uncomfortably. Good. They should be uncomfortable. We called them monsters. We feared them without knowing them. We created laws to keep them caged, to keep ourselves safe from their terrible strength. And when the darkness came for us, when we screamed for salvation, it was the monsters who answered. Her voice grew stronger. I watched human soldiers board Kethvari warships in the vacuum of space. I watched them fight in conditions that would kill any of us in seconds. I saw their strength, their ferocity, their absolute refusal to surrender or retreat. Now her voice softened, but I also saw a human medic kneel before a wounded Velith child and promise her that everything would be okay. I saw human engineers work through the night to rebuild our hospitals. I saw human soldiers weep at the mass graves of our people and swear oaths of remembrance. I saw the monsters cry for strangers they had never met. Tears were running down her translucent cheeks now. She did not try to hide them. You looked at humanity and saw death. We looked at them and found life. The fiercest protectors the galaxy has ever known. They did not come for conquest. They did not come for power. They came because someone needed help, and they could not imagine not answering. She looked directly at the Concord representatives who had once voted to quarantine Earth. That is what your monsters gave us. That is what your Deathworlders left behind. Not destruction, not chaos, hope, freedom, survival. She stepped back from the podium. The hall was silent. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with the liberated species, the ones who had been freed from Kethvari chains. Then it spread. Delegate after delegate rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, celebrating. Not everyone joined. Some Concord representatives sat in stiff silence. But they were the minority now. Later that day, Admiral Voss found Lysizana in the gardens outside the assembly hall. The crystal flowers were blooming, filling the air with sweet fragrance. Voss stood beside the Velith elder and looked out at the restored beauty of Shalora. That was quite a speech, Voss said. You're going to make us blush. Lysizana turned to face the human. I spoke only the truth. You saved my people. You saved dozens of species. You broke the chains of 10,000 years. Voss shrugged. We did what anyone would do. No. That is exactly my point. You did what anyone should do. But no one else did. Only you. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice softer than Lysizana had ever heard it. "We're not heroes. We're just human. Our world was hard. It taught us that survival means protecting each other. When we heard your signal, we couldn't not come. The thought of ignoring it, of going back to our lives while people were dying, it would have been wrong. It would have meant betraying everything we believe in." Lysizana reached out and touched Voss's scarred hand. "That is precisely why you are heroes. You could not conceive of abandoning strangers to darkness. Your death world did not make you cruel, it made you kind." Voss looked at their joined hands. Human and Velith. Predator and prey. Warrior and pacifist. Yet in this moment, they were simply two people who understood each other. "The galaxy still fears us," Voss said. "Many species will never trust humans. They will always see us as monsters. Then we will show them otherwise," Lysizana replied. "One act of kindness at a time. One rescue at a time. One generation at a time. The truth about humanity will spread. I will make sure of it." In the months that followed, a monument was built in the fields outside Lysizana's observatory. It was a great beacon, far more powerful than the ancient machine she had used to send her desperate SOS. But this beacon sent a different message. It broadcast across the galaxy, in every language, on every frequency. If you are lost, if you are afraid, if you have no one left to call, Earth will answer. The Deathworlders protect their own. And now, you are all our own. Earth will wait, Earth will too. Other species began adding their own beacons to the network. The Velith were first, then the Thessians, then a dozen more liberated peoples. A web of hope spread across the galaxy, connecting worlds that had once been isolated, promising protection to those who had none. Humanity had been caged. Now they were free. And they used that freedom not to conquer, not to dominate, but to protect, to serve, to answer the calls of those in need. Somewhere in deep space, far from any charted system, another SOS began to transmit. A small colony, threatened by pirates, called out into the void with desperate hope. On Earth, sensor stations detected the signal. Alarms began to sound. Ships began to mobilize. In the command center, a young officer looked at the incoming data and smiled. "Another one," she said. "Coordinates are locked. Fleet is standing by." Her commander nodded. "Send them." The ships launched. Another rescue mission. Another chance to prove what humanity truly was. The galaxy had called them monsters. The galaxy had feared them. But the galaxy was learning a new truth. The monsters were the good guys, and they would never stop answering. Far across the stars, Lysizana stood at her observatory window and watched the sky. Somewhere out there, human ships were racing to save another world. Somewhere out there, strangers were learning that they were not alone. She pressed her 4 hands against the glass and smiled. The darkness was still out there. It would always be out there. But now, something else was out there too. Something that fought back. Something that protected the weak and punished the cruel. Hope. The Deathworlders had brought hope to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same again.